Kendrick Lamar's 2015 album, To Pimp a Butterfly. I mean, where do you even start with this one? It's one of the greatest albums of all time, and today I'm gonna break down why, track by track. It's a masterpiece for three distinct reasons: the lyricism, the music, and the overall story. And the way I see this album, it's structured in 5 distinct thematic sections. There's one overarching story, like you should not shuffle this album, because there are 5 acts, let's call them, that make up To Pimp a Butterfly. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna break down this video into those same 5 acts. We'll take a quick breather in between each as we pick apart the musical elements, the lyricism, and the overarching story to see how incredible this album is. But first, an obvious disclaimer. I'm not going to be able to cover absolutely every reference from this album. There's just not enough time. Also, one of the dominant themes on this album is the experience of being black, which I am not. So as the album dives deep into these things and I analyze them, I'm aware that I'm not getting the same thing out of this as someone who is black. But from my perspective, this album is so powerful and so eye-opening and thought-provoking for people who are white, it's worth talking about. Also, how am I gonna have a channel called Digging the Greats if I don't cover one of the greatest albums of all time? Also, there are 2 versions of this video. Over on Patreon, the video is longer, better, and more music, and the lyrics aren't censored. On YouTube, it'll be a little shorter, especially the music sections, because I have to, and the lyrics will be censored. Even still, a lot of the subject matter is not appropriate for kids, so just giving you a heads up. Alright. Kick back, relax, and let's dive into the world of Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly. I'm going to call Act 1 Conflicted. Over the first handful of songs, we're going to see Kendrick get signed to a record deal, get a ton of money and influence, and just sort of see what happens. Is he going to make wise decisions? Is he capable of making wise decisions? This is based on Kendrick's real life, but it's also a story, and Kendrick is not the only character in this story. So let's see what happens when you give a young, hungry rapper, or, you know, a caterpillar, a ton of money and fame. First up, the opening song, Wesley's Theory. The very first thing we hear is a song slowly fading in. It's filtered so we can't quite hear it yet, but as the filter widens and we can hear it clearer, we hear the words, "Every N-word is a star." This sort of feels like, wait, am I hearing this right? Because it's so jarring, especially as the starting place for the album. The N-word is just being casually sung, and it's this retro, like, positive sounding song. It's kind of alarming, and it's supposed to be. This is in fact a real song whose title is the same as this lyric, which is from a movie of the same name. This song is from 1973, and the artist is Boris Gardner, a Jamaican artist who wrote this song for the movie with the intent of changing the perspective of the N-word and making it a positive thing. Of course, there are layers of complexity to this word, but this is where Kendrick is starting To Pimp a Butterfly. This odd sort of positive sounding, but almost too perfect, like dreamy sounding sample. It fades in, it's repeating until the bubble finally bursts, and then we're into the main groove of the song. The dream is over, and we're back in the dark world we were in before with his previous album, Good Kid, Mad City. It's significant that the thing that breaks the spell from the beginning sample into the main groove is the words "hit me," which is sort of a nod to James Brown, a huge star who preceded him. It sort of feels like, here's the dream, hit me, here's reality. This, of course, is built upon with the lyrics. We hear a voice say, "Hit me!"
When the 4 corners of this cocoon collide, you'll slip through the cracks, hoping that you'll survive. Gather your wit, take a deep look inside. Are you really who they idolize? To pimp a butterfly.
This is a summary of the journey we're about to go on. It's like the abstract at the beginning of an academic research paper. Now, the chorus of the song is not literal. He's not talking about how his love for his first girlfriend has turned to lust. He's talking about how his love for music has turned from love to lust, and using a familiar and crude metaphor to explain it.
At first I did love you, but I just wanna late nights thinking of you until I got my nut.
He continues through the first verse, saying how crazy he's gonna go when he gets signed. It feels like he's dropping everything he's learned from the previous album, but Kendrick has said this is basically traveling back in time to how he felt when he first got signed. So this is Kendrick, but younger Kendrick, but also it's the character of Kendrick, because there's a lot that happens on this album that's not literal, as this chorus has already shown us. There's a hook between verses that seems to be the man regretting that Kendrick and black people in general have money. Here's Thundercat and George Clinton.
We should never get, we should never get. Money go back home, money go back home.
This is likely a reference to the Chappelle Show Rick James sketch, where Chappelle, as Rick James, says the same thing.
Nose having mother. They said he never gave you money.
This song features George Clinton and Thundercat. George Clinton, of course, of Parliament and Funkadelic fame. The man is an absolute legend. Thundercat is a more modern bass player and singer who has a very distinct style. His influence can be heard all over this album, from vocals to specific chords, production to the tone of the bass. It's all very Thundercat. Take a listen to this and notice the bass tone. It's wild, and the whole groove feels so dark and gritty and funky. It's this mix of very funky George Clinton sounding funk with more modern Thundercat sounding bass, with the James Brown Hit Me peppered in as well. This is something Kendrick does a lot on this album. He incorporates so many different musical genres and references from across the musical spectrum, specifically the African American musical spectrum. I think there's a meaningful reason for this beyond that it just kind of sounds cool, but I'll mention that in a few songs. The second verse introduces a new character, Uncle Sam. He encourages Kendrick to spend money and go wild, to borrow money if he runs out, just keep buying. We hear a chant about the tax man coming and how he's gonna Wesley Snipes him before he's 35. Wesley Snipes, of course, served jail time for tax evasion. So, pause. First off, this is an incredible intro to this album. Kendrick is clearly setting up a story, setting up stakes, the world, and the main problem. He's got all this money and fame, and he wants to go crazy, like he doesn't really know any better. As he says in the song, he's, quote, uneducated, but I got $1 million check. We can also clearly see that a trap has been set for him by Uncle Sam. He doesn't like that Kendrick has money, so he's encouraging him to go bankrupt by spending all of it, and he's gonna finish him off with a huge tax bill. But also, the pressures of the music industry are upon him. The pressures of fame are on him. He's invoking all these other black celebrities like Rick James, Chappelle, Wesley Snipes, and he continues this through the next few songs, pointing out how they're so often exploited for the talent by, quote, the man, in order to make money for the larger system. In other words, Kendrick, who is in the middle of a transformative process, beginning as a young, hungry rapper and turning into, as we'll see, a butterfly, he can see this pattern and he can see that he's being pimped out. How we doing? You still with me? This is just the opening song. I told you there's a lot to cover. Let's keep this going. The next song is For Free. This is a very frantic sounding jazz piece. A lot of times when people talk about this album, they call it jazz influenced, but this isn't influenced at all. This is just jazz. This isn't even really a hip-hop song, it's just a jazz song with poetry over it. Kendrick's flow is frantic along with the music, and when keyboardist Robert Glasper recorded this, he said that producer Terrace Martin, by the way, both of them are unbelievable musicians, he told him not to think of it as hip-hop at all, just treat it as a straight-ahead jazz song. Glasper said that Kendrick came up with an idea. So at a certain point in the song, he's rapping a specific rhythmic pattern and repeating it. And you can hear the piano and the rest of the band follow him and hit complementary rhythms with him. That was Kendrick's idea. At that point, Glasper said he just treated Kendrick like he would any other soloist. Like, if he was a sax player going off on a solo, he would do the same thing, moving with the rhythm of the sax. So, just in this case, Kendrick is the soloist.
Your moccasins has been relentless. Forgiveness, your feelings, your sources, all distortion. If we it's more abortion.
Lyrically, it starts with a woman berating him and trying to break him down, saying that he's worthless. She's representing America as a whole. Kendrick responds, sticking up to the man, who is, in this case, a woman, but he refuses to be taken advantage of. His flow here plays off the band, as we just looked at. It's poetic, it's musical, it's passionate, it's incredible. It ends with the woman, representing America, saying that she's going to go get her Uncle Sam to mess him up. The tax man's coming. This isn't just jazz-influenced hip-hop, it's jazz plain and simple. Another African-American form of music, like the funk we started with on the previous song, and like the funk we hear on the next song, King Kunta. This song is crazy funky, with a bass line that's interpolated from the song Get Naked by Mossberg featuring DJ Quick. Here's Get Naked. King Kunta. This song feels very Parliament in its funk. Like, compare the groove of King Kunta to Give Up the Funk by Parliament from the classic album Mothership Connection from 1975. King Kunta's version of this is actually from We Want the Funk by Ahmad from 1994. The Parliament influence is clear, but then there's lyrical quotes throughout. In this song, Kendrick quotes James Brown,
I can dig rapping.
Jay-Z,
I was gonna kill a couple rappers, but they did it themselves.
and Michael Jackson.
Screaming, Annie, are you okay? Annie, are you okay?
Kendrick is invoking all of these famous black musicians for a specific purpose. He's looking at the history of black musicians and how the industry has pimped them. And he's using these lines to remind us that he's aware of this history and this pattern of the music industry, or America as a whole, exploiting black people for their talent. Lyrically, Kendrick is back in his hometown of Compton and is just flexing the hell out of everything. There are the lyrical quotes throughout that we already looked at, but one other big thing to mention here is the name King Kunta. Kunta Kinte is a character from the novel Roots, the Saga of an American Family, which is also a TV adaptation. Kunta Kinte was a slave who had his foot cut off, which Kendrick is referencing on the chorus.
Bitch, where you and I was walking. Now I run the game, got the whole world talking. King Kunta, everybody wanna cut the legs off him. Kunta, black man taking no loss. Oh yeah.
The name King Kunta is a bit of an oxymoron. Kendrick knows he's a slave, but he's also a king too, specifically when it comes to the music industry. Again, there's a trap set out for him, and he can see it, not only insisting on the last song about how he won't be taken advantage of, but invoking famous black musicians and staking his claim as a king, but also a slave who refuses to comply. Now, at the end of the song, we get a line from a poem, quote, "I remember you was conflicted, misusing your influence," which seems to be what Kendrick has just done in this song, going back to Compton and flexing on everybody. That's interesting. Well, let's keep going. The next song, and the final song of what I consider to be Act 1, is Institutionalized. We have musical devices throughout this album like beat switches, which we hear on Institutionalized. It starts with this dreamy sounding sequence, which then switches to a completely different groove. This goes in line with what's happening lyrically and story-wise as well, and some of these grooves, they're just incredible. There's lots of voice manipulation on this album too, Kendrick rapping as different characters, and at the beginning of Institutionalized, it's very distinct.
What money got to do with it when I don't know the full definition of a rap image? Trapped inside the ghetto and I ain't proud to admit it. Institutionalized, I keep running back for a visit. Hold up.
This whole song feels like a dream state. In the first verse, it feels like these are Kendrick's inner thoughts. He's stuck in a bad mindset. He can't handle money well, and he knows this is not going to end well. Snoop Dogg acts as an omniscient narrator, showing our main character, Kendrick, and how poorly prepared he is for the situation he's in. Bilal sings the chorus, which is advice that Kendrick's grandmother gave him.
Don't change it till you get up and wash your ass. Don't change it till you get up and wash your ass.
In other words, nothing is going to change for you until you take care of some stuff in your own life for yourself. So far on this album, we've been dropped into a world where young Kendrick has just gotten a record deal, is about to go wild right into Uncle Sam's trap. Kendrick knows this, but is seemingly powerless to change his fate. He's misusing his influence, but this grandmotherly advice, this is the first wise voice we've heard from on this album. Snoop finishes the song off by summarizing everything we've seen so far.
Talented but still under the neighborhood rules. You could take the boy out the hood, but you can't take the hood off the homie.
This concludes Act 1, what I'm calling conflicted. Kendrick has perfectly laid out the situation. He's been given all of this money and power and influence as a talented young rapper, and there are forces around him that are pulling him in different directions. America, Uncle Sam, his upbringing in Compton, his own pride and ego. These first 4 songs, Wesley's Theory, For Free, King Kunta, and Institutionalized, lay out the main conflict as Kendrick starts out his journey of fame. This album loosely follows the hero's journey. It's a structure for myths, the most popular version of which was by Joseph Campbell. If you're not familiar, think of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Remember that one? That basically follows it to a T. Our hero has to leave home and go on a difficult journey, ultimately returning home with newly gained wisdom. So this first act serves as the first quadrant, the first quarter of this story. The journey is just beginning. How you feeling? You good? You still with me? You need some water? I need some water. Jeez, man. All right, let the journey continue. Let's talk about Act 2. At the beginning of the next song, These Walls, we get more of this poem. I remember you was conflicted, misusing your influence. Sometimes I did the same. And then we get the rest of the song in which Kendrick does exactly that. But of course, it's Kendrick, so it's trickier than that. It starts by laying out a scenario in which a woman wants to get with a man. The phrase, if these walls could talk, is expanded on with the walls meaning multiple things. The walls of Kendrick's mind, or a prison cell, or the walls of this woman's... You get it. Kendrick gets with this woman, but then in the last verse, it breaks down and we see his true motives. She has children with the man who shot and killed Kendrick's friend in Good Kid, Mad City, and he specifically references the song Sing About Me.
So when you play the song, rewind the first verse. About me abusing my power so you can hurt. About me and her in the shower whenever she horny. About me and her at the hours of the morning. About her baby daddy currently serving life. And how she think about you until we meet up at night. About the only girl cared about you when you asked her. And how she on a famous rapper.
Musically, this is a very Thundercat sounding song. The bass, the chords, the overall groove, it's got his fingerprints all over it. Add Bilal and Anna Wise singing on top of that, it just feels incredible. Kendrick is abusing his power, using his fame for sex and revenge. He's full of resentment. This song ends with even more of this poem, adding the line, full of resentment, resentment that turned into a deep depression. Found myself screaming in a hotel room. This poem is peppered all throughout the album. Whereas on Good Kid, we got skits in between songs, skits that tied the whole narrative together. On To Pimp a Butterfly, we get these lines of a poem which get longer each time we hear them. This album didn't open with this poem, we were just dropped right into the action. But between songs, this poem serves as a setup for the scene we're about to see, the song we're about to hear. So like when Kendrick just said, found myself screaming in a hotel room, here's the opening of the next song, You. He's now dealing with a deep depression, which is the song You. He's having a mental breakdown. When Kendrick says loving you is complicated, he's referring to himself. Kendrick mentions his struggles with alcoholism. He's crying and hysterical on the second verse. The third verse is like his alcoholism and depression talking directly to himself. This is a difficult song to listen to. You're not just gonna pull this one up when you're driving to the store. It's an extreme low point in the story of the album, but it's necessary for the story. Mixed by Ali described the recording session as difficult to get through as well. He said, "The session for you was very uncomfortable. Lamar wrote it in the booth. The mic was on and I could hear him walking back and forth and having these super angry vocals. Then he'd start recording with the lights off and it was super emotional. I never asked what got into him that day." Musically, the song You feels like all of these genres are kind of breaking down, and the primary focus is the vocals. I'm not gonna play a clip from it because it's a difficult song to just drop in and out of, but it's crucial to the overall story. So next time you give this full album a listen through, sit with it. And then on the next song, we get a moment of hope. This is probably the most famous song from the album. All Right. This was produced by Pharrell, which is obvious as soon as you hear the classic Pharrell 4 hits at the top. Kendrick opens the song by quoting Oprah Winfrey from The Color Purple.
All my life I had to fight.
All's my life I has to fight.
He ends by saying, "If God's got us, then we gon' be all right." I mean, I can't not play it, right?
We gon' be alright.
Nigga, we gon' be alright.
This beat, the vocal sample here, the drums, the bass, the sax on top, it's so good, but there's another subtle element to the groove that's very unique in this song. For instance, where's beat 1? Where's 1? Is this in 4/4? Is it a bar of 3 and then a bar of 5? This groove is just in 4/4, but the emphasis on the beats are different than the standard 4/4 groove. It feels like it's a bar of 3 followed by a bar of 5. Like you could count it as 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Alternatively, you could count it as 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the first verse, he talks about police brutality. This song became an anthem for the Black Lives Matter movement, but also about his own temptations with drugs, money, and women. But he's at the preacher's door trying to turn this around. But on the second verse, we get the introduction of a new character. Lucy, which is short for Lucifer, the devil himself, or herself in this case. Lucy is there to tempt Kendrick with material things.
What you want? You a house, you a car, 40 acres and a mule, a piano, a guitar, anything. See, my name is Lucy, I'm your dog. You can live at the mall.
This feels like a parallel with the story in the Bible when the devil is tempting Jesus with similar promises. The end of this song brings back the poem, which this time adds to the end. Didn't want to self-destruct. The evils of Lucy was all around me, so I went running for answers. That's exactly what we just saw. He's trying to do better, but evil is all around him. This same musical device that we just looked at is used on the groove of the next song, For Sale. It's this incredibly light and dreamy sounding groove that's just in 4/4, but the emphasis on the last phrase makes it feel like a pairing of 3 and 5 again, instead of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. On this song, we get more from Lucy. That's why it's this crazy, euphoric sounding music underneath. It's like Kendrick is in a manic state, or high, or just entranced by Lucy. In the second verse, Lucy says,
Lucy, go move your mama out of Compton inside the gigantic mansion like I promised. Lucy just wants your trust and loyalty. Avoiding me, it's not so easy. I'm at these functions accordingly.
And you pair this with the music underneath, and it's an incredible effect. This song is titled For Sale, which contrasts directly with the track from the beginning, For Free, and sees Lucy basically arguing like, yeah, you are worth it. You gotta do this. Just sign this contract right here. Again, at the end of the song, we get the poem, this time adding the line, so I went running for answers until I came home, which is exactly what Kendrick does on the next song, Mama, but that's in the next act. Let's take a quick break and review Act 2. I called this act messiness because that kind of sums it up. Kendrick is misusing his influence for sex and revenge on these walls. He breaks down entirely on You, has some hope on Alright, but then the devil, Lucy, shows up and starts tempting him with all kinds of things. Kendrick's problems aren't just material, they're not just money and women. Now he's in the spiritual realm getting tempted by the devil herself. I call this act messiness because when a caterpillar goes into the cocoon and starts its transformation as the butterfly, right? There's this whole period of time where if you open the cocoon, it's just goo. You won't find a caterpillar, you won't find a butterfly, it's just weird goo. Of course, if you leave it long enough and let it do its thing, it will eventually become a butterfly. But this weird goo phase, it's messy, but it's absolutely necessary. And I wasn't about to call Act 2 Goo Phase. This is the next quadrant of our circular story, but it's not quite a circle, I guess, because these are sort of self-contained mini-arcs that are connected to each other in one main story. I don't know, we'll see where this goes. Also, we have this poem that's breaking up the album. Who wrote this poem? What is it for? Why is Kendrick reading it? And who is he reading it to? Alright, here's the thing. I've never done this before, but there is just so much to this album and you can't skip over anything that this is going to be a two-part series. This video covered Act 1 and 2, and next week I'll cover Acts 3, 4, and 5 as we follow Kendrick through on this journey. If you liked part 1 of this video, do me a favor and click the like button below. And if you're not subscribed, you should hit subscribe too. You can also check out the full extended version of this video at patreon.com/diggingthegreats. More music, uncensored, even longer. I'll see you next week for part 2 of To Pimp a Butterfly.